All right, we are live. Let me make sure I can see the comments. All right, think we're good to go. So we will jump right in. Welcome to the Creative Scholar Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dannetta, and I am so excited that you decided to join me right here at the intersection of theology, psychology, and creativity. And today we have just a few topics to cover, a couple of things that are quite interesting and I believe will be of help and in some ways entertaining for many of us. But I for sure hope to share some things that will be encouragement and that will be of resource to many of you. All right, so we're going to actually start off tonight talking about something that I believe is a huge part of getting into flow for creatives. So, for those of you who are just joining us, either last week or the week before last, we talked about flow theory when it comes to creativity and even when it comes to just being productive, whether you're doing something that you would classify as creative or not. And so, with flow theory, there is a special place that those of us who are trying to be creative or who are trying to produce, there's a special place that oftentimes we struggle to get to where we are working on our things and we are not distracted and we're able to work at a particular level of concentration and we're able to produce and create great things. We fight resistance, and sometimes that resistance is internal. Sometimes it comes by way of our thoughts, our feelings, things that are happening with our bodies. And then sometimes that resistance is external by way of things that are happening in our environment or just conditions or situations that we know about that we don't have any internal control over, but that affect us internally. So as we are trying to work through resistance to get to that state of flow where we are able to create well and where we are able to do the things that we long to do, oftentimes there are changes that we can make. There are um, maybe habits that we have that we need to adjust. Sometimes there are routines that we have that no longer work for this point in our lives where we're trying to get to that state of flow. And so tonight, we're going to talk briefly about one of the things that I believe affects a lot of us as creative people the most, and that is sleep hygiene. We're going to talk about sleep hygiene. I know for me, sleep hygiene is absolutely a thing. I think it's probably been 5 years or so, maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years. It's been a few years, but a few years ago I did a live video here on YouTube where I talked about some of the struggles that creatives have. And one of those was that many of us tend to be night owls. We tend to be people who try maybe all day long sometimes to get into a focused state to accomplish something, but it seems like only in the midnight hour is when we're able to actually be creative, and a lot of times that's because there is a lack of distraction. For those of you who have children at home, or you have a spouse, or you have just people living in the home with you. It could be roommates or whatever, or even for those people who live alone. Just the light happening outside, and hearing people walking around, just knowing that life is happening. Sometimes just the knowledge that things are going on around you might be a bit of a distraction. And so a lot of times creative people tend to be night owls, and being a night owl oftentimes doesn't do a whole lot for being rested enough to think well, unless you are in a space in life where your routine calls for you to rest during the day, and then be up at all hours of the evening and into the early morning to accomplish your creative tasks. I know as a recording artist, there have been many times where I have been in the studio into late in the midnight hour, and when I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone. I remember sometimes when I was recording my last project where a break needed to be taken by the engineer and by the producer, and maybe there were interruptions, people needed to come into the studio for whatever, and I would be in such a zone that I would stay in the booth until the engineer was ready to start back up. And it would be a time where, like, I probably really should have taken a break, but I would keep water in the booth with me. And sometimes they would have to come get me out of the booth and say, girl, come on out of this booth for the next 30 minutes because thus and such is going on. And a lot of times that was at midnight, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. There have been times where I had to record during daylight hours because that was the studio time that I had, and that was, from traveling, like having to catch a flight to get back home. Like, you use the hours that you have for the money that you paid. But, there are other times where I don't have to work in the midnight hour, but it seems like that is when I work the best. Unfortunately, that impacts my sleep hygiene. So I have been having to learn new ways to get focused to do things. For example, I do the podcast a little bit later in the evening than I originally planned because I am able to have a few hours to switch modes from my daytime mode of my day job and come and take care of things that I need to take care of so that I can get into the mode and the mind frame of hosting my podcast. So as I'm making that adjustment, I'm having to stay attentive of things that impact my sleep hygiene as well. So what about you? I'd love to hear in the comments or see in the comments some of the ways that you are impacted by your sleep schedule. So let's talk really briefly about some of the things that are included with sleep hygiene. So one of the more obvious things that we can do to have better sleep hygiene is going to obviously be sticking to a sleep schedule and setting aside at least 7 to 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, a lot of times, people who are night owls think that, the problem is not getting enough sleep. But there are people whose main problem is maybe the way their schedule is and they're able to sleep in during the day. Maybe they sleep too much because their body is just off kilter. So setting a sleep schedule where you get at least 8 hours. We all know to do that. We don't all do it, especially when we've gotten into the habit or the routine of just not of being up late in the midnight, or for those of us who have a prayer life, there are seasons in your prayer life where you will wake up in 4 o'clock in the morning, and like, this wasn't just a wake up to go tinkle. This was a wake up because, okay, I need to intercede. I need to pray. There's something that God is saying to me. So you might find yourself up for an hour or two or three, and then in prayer, or just writing down what God is speaking, or pouring out the abundance of your heart, and then you still have to get up and go to work. So, those are things that there's not always an easy or a quick fix to when it comes to getting enough sleep. But at least getting in a good habit of most nights getting at least 8 hours of sleep. Some of you, the Lord might be waking you up every night, and prayerfully, those of you who the Lord is waking you up every night, you don't have to go out and you can get a couple of hours of sleep in the morning. But yeah, so it's not always a quick and easy answer, but it is a reminder to develop good habits, no matter what our ages are. We have different sleep and rest needs at different ages. So, and research shows that in so many ways, obviously, children need a whole lot more sleep than adults because they are still growing. Their bodies are still literally developing, and their brains and their minds are still developing. They need a lot more recovery time than adults, but at the same time they recover pretty quickly, usually from a harrowing day or a very tiring day. Sometimes as adults it might take us a couple of days to recover from one night of not getting sleep. So sleep is very important. um, Another area of sleep hygiene is paying attention to not only the time that we eat, but the things that we eat and drink. We know the things that are going to have us up, such as caffeine. I know for me, caffeine, especially certain days, not often, but a couple of days a month. Caffeine is a huge thing for me. Like midday. Normally, I'm a first thing in the morning coffee drinker, but then sometimes, every now and then, I may reach for a cup of coffee in the afternoon. Now, I know that if I drink coffee in the afternoon, I'm gonna be up. Now, some of y'all been drinking coffee since. Some of y'all have been drinking coffee for so long that coffee doesn't really do a whole lot for you. Like, you can drink coffee and then you're good. You will go to sleep like it's nothing in 3 or 4 hours. That is not the case for me, so I have to be careful of caffeine. Creating a restful environment is also an area of sleep hygiene. Some of us, like I've said before, I think maybe on the pod, that I'm one of those people that has had a habit for a long time of falling asleep reading. So I will fall asleep with the light on. One of the ways that I have helped to alleviate that is by getting a blue light in my room. So it's enough light for me to read, but if I happen to fall asleep, I have a light on me that's actually supposed to help me to sleep better. So, buying a special light might be a recommendation for creating a restful environment. Clearing your resting area of clutter, doing what you can to monitor the temperature. Another area of sleep hygiene, surprisingly, is limiting daytime naps. And, the sleep owls who are able to sleep in during the day, that's a thing. And one of the hacks that works with being up super late but trying to get back on your sleep schedule is suffering through it the next day and not taking that daytime nap and then going to bed at a reasonable hour the next day. Another area of sleep hygiene is exercise, getting that physical activity in daily. It doesn't always have to be a run, it doesn't always have to be a full on gym gear, weights, treadmill. It doesn't even have to be that. It can literally be taking a walk around the neighborhood. It can literally be one of my favorite things, especially when I'm trying to make sure I got my 30 minutes for the day and my Apple Watch is telling me 22, but it feels like an hour because I'm so tired that particular day. Turn on some music and dance. Get your heart rate up and get that physical activity. For some people, it's better to do that a few hours before sleep. For others, it is right before bed will get you ready to be knocked out. Um, and I found for me, like, the listening to music and dancing is one of the things that helps me to get some movement in if my movement hasn't reached its requirement for the day, which most times for my few days a week that I try to make sure I have activity is 30 minutes. The last one that I'll share is managing worries. Managing worries. For those people who deal with any levels or any forms or manifestations of anxiety, for those people who deal with ADHD in its adult form, or even for like teens and children, different things that may cause our minds to race, managing those things. So for those people who, you're reflecting at the end of the day and you find that your mind is racing, Sometimes if there is something happening with mental health, there are solutions for that, or there are different practices and mechanisms for coping with that and managing that. But for people who you wouldn't necessarily classify as needing, or you don't necessarily classify as someone who has anxiety disorder, but you know that your anxious thoughts are more prominent when it's time to go to bed because everything gets quiet. To manage those anxious thoughts, um, managing those anxious thoughts through prayer, through journaling, through breathing, through doing things that are going to naturally relax the body and allow the mind to begin to slow down and do what it's supposed to do when you are resting or sleeping. One of the habits that I'm putting back into place now is drinking tea at night. Trying to drink like some kind of an herbal tea. I used to do chamomile, but chamomile tea gives me lucid dreams, and I'm already a dreamer, so I don't necessarily need anything giving me any help in the dream area. So when I found that, like, okay, chamomile tea is supposed to relax you, but it's giving me lucid dreams, so I stopped with the chamomile tea. And I didn't really have a tea that I like to drink at night, but I've been trying some different ones again to put tea back into my nighttime routine. I love tea. I love to try different types of tea, especially herbal teas. But I had gotten out of the habit of drinking it at night. I would drink it sometimes as a substitute for coffee. Or I know when I was in school, I would drink tea like midday just because it was kind of a pick me up, even without adding the extra caffeine. But I hadn't really found one until recently. One of the ones that I've been enjoying is, I think it's turmeric and honey. One of them is turmeric and honey. Um, and some other ones that are herbal. So if you know of a good nighttime herbal tea, please drop it in the comments. Share the wealth of knowledge with those of us who are tea lovers, because I am looking for a nighttime tea, but something that does not have chamomile in it. Because it's not the it's yeah. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm sensitive to that. Some people, drink it and they just have the best sleep, but it's a gamble for me. So yeah, I'd love to know if you have any nighttime tea recommendations, because that is one of the things that I'm adding to my sleep hygiene regimen. All right, so that was the first thing I wanted to talk about today, just as a reminder for creatives to um, sometimes we can't just stop with like, oh, I'm a night owl. If being a night owl and just accepting that without addressing our habits, um, it's it's not going to be conducive to whatever it is that you're working on long term, unless again you are someone who can stay up all night and get your 8 hours in during the day. And for most of us, that is not the case. So we have to do what we need to do to address our habits. Another thing that I don't have on my list, but that I think is very, very, very prominent amongst creative people, it's going to be social media, scrolling on social media, or if not just social media, just using um, different devices, like reading with different devices. Um, like reading on the Kindle, things. And one thing I love about the Kindle is you can turn it on to nighttime mode, and so it changes the light that is coming from the Kindle. But most of us have devices that we use, and those devices help to keep us distracted and wide awake. So I mentioned the other week the challenge that I am doing with the entrepreneurship coaching group that I'm in. I'm a part of a challenge, and when it came to the wellness aspect, that was one of the habits that I'm challenging myself with for the month of August, and that is um, getting back in the habit of turning off all devices, or at least putting them away, no longer using them. I use my phone as my alarm, so I don't turn my phone off. And obviously, I want people to be able to reach me in the case of an emergency, but getting out of the habit of scrolling until I fall asleep. And so far, so good. Today is 13. There's been one day out of 13 that I forgot about my challenge rule and picked up my phone probably like 2 o'clock in the morning because I woke up and started scrolling on the phone. But I've been trying to, instead of scrolling, going back to what I used to do all the time, and that's read. And so, yeah, that's another area of sleep hygiene to consider for those of us who are trying to work on things that will help us to not only be our best at being creatives, but help us to be our best at being productive and accomplishing things that we want to accomplish. And so, yeah, sleep is going to be a big thing. All right, we're going to move on from there. And speaking of social media, that is the next thing that I want to talk about. The next two things I want to talk about, and they really connect a whole lot. And so, as a content creator and as a person who has a business whereby I do use social media to some degree in order to market my business and in order to be in contact, in some communication with the demographic that I serve, of some people who are already aware of what I do and what I offer, and then of course to be able to connect to new people, because I know there are people out there who need what I provide through my business. And for those of you who are new to me, I am a counselor and a personal development coach through my business. And the name of my business is Excel at Being Yourself. And you can find me on Instagram at EB Institute, EABY Institute. You'll find me on Instagram there. But so I'm saying that to say I have been studying a little bit more closely how things work when it comes to marketing your business using social media. Now, I've been on social media since the beginning of social media. I wasn't huge on Facebook when Facebook first became a thing. But once I got on Facebook, everything that has come out since Facebook, I have most likely been on as far as your basic social media. I don't know if y'all remember Social Cam. When Social Cam was a thing, I was on Social Cam. Oh man, and I really, if I'm not mistaken, Social Cam is just like completely gone. It's not even up anymore. I don't believe. If I'm wrong, somebody please tell me in the comments. But my feelings were so hurt when I went back and tried to get on my Social Cam because I had favorited videos of some different singers that I just like absolutely love that are nowhere else. Such a sidebar, but one of them was Molly Music used to get on his social media and he would just sing and play his guitar. And some of the stuff he used to sing, he hasn't put out. But one of them, and I'll maybe if I remember, I will put it in the description. Is a song. I don't know what he would call it, but I call it "Let This Mind Be in You." And I went back to Social Cam trying to see my playlist of all the singers that I like, just singing. Not produced, no lights, no echoes, no microphone. They're literally just singing. And I couldn't find my Social Cam videos. I think Social Cam is gone. Y'all let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. But anyway, since there has been social media, I've been on it. I've had the Social Cam. I have Snapchat. I just got back on that a couple weeks ago, even though after the day I got on it, I haven't been back on it. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. What else is there? TikTok. TikTok. I don't know why I need to slow down. That might be what it is. TikTok. If you name it, I have it, and I have played around with creating content on all of those platforms, and some of them I'm on more consistently than others. But now that I have businesses And now that I have a podcast, I am learning to be much more strategic. Um, I'm not just posting and hoping something happens. Well, I am doing that. I am posting knowing that um, all I can do is what I can do, and whoever's going to get it can get it. But there's a lot more that I understand now that I can do based upon study when it comes to marketing with any kind of video or digital content. And so in my study, one of the things that I saw with Instagram is that for people who have businesses, or if you're someone who wants a business, or you have some kind of content that can bring you income and you want to get it out there to a larger audience or to a more diverse audience than what you have now, one of the suggestions that is being made is to unfollow everyone. Unfollow everyone is what I've read. And truth be told, in years past, I have thought about unfollowing everyone that I follow. One, because a lot of the people that I follow on Instagram, I'm kind of one of those people who I like what I like, but at the same time, I love new things. Like, it has been, I've gotten a good chuckle out of it, but over the past 10 years, I've seen at least five creators like blow up hugely that I followed when they were very small creators. Well, not small in importance, but you know what I'm saying. They didn't have a huge following. And I remember discovering for myself some of these creators from just randomly being online and being like, oh, so and so is just, they're so neat, or this is so dope what they're doing. And not thinking anything of it, and slowly but surely seeing those creators like blow up so huge. And so even though I'm a creator myself, I definitely believe I have an eye for what is really good, or things that are just not just new, but very interesting, and things that I can see like, oh, this could have some real depth. I mean, obviously, I can't predict who's going to blow up and who's going to have a huge influence as far as numbers go. But it's been cool to see small creators go really far. And one of the things that I notice about some of those creators is that they don't follow anyone. They may follow like their spouse, they may follow like maybe two or three other creators. Um, or if they do have a following, or not a following, if they do follow more than like two or three creators, if you look at who they follow people that are either in their niche or people who have the interests of the clientele that they serve. And so I'm noticing that people are a lot more strategic about who they follow if their platform is for the purpose of business. And so that is something I have been reading up on a little bit more. Is one of many things that I have been studying lately about how social media works. And I think more than anything, because I hear a lot of the larger creators, they're all complaining now about the algorithm. They're all complaining now about how they used to get, 10,000 likes and 70,000 views for every post, and now they're getting maybe a tenth of that. And so, a lot of people are talking about what's happening with the algorithm and this, that, and the third. And so, obviously, if that is your sole source of income, it's going to matter to you even more how many eyes are being exposed to the things that you put out. And then just remembering old school social media where your timeline was literally who posted based upon the chronology. So if you follow 50 people and 25 of them post on Monday, when you open up your feed, you're going to see all 25, and you're going to see them in the order that they posted based upon the time. Or it might be from front to back. So But either way, you would get to a point where it will tell you like, oh, you've seen all of your people. So, back then, following, let's say, 100 people, you know, you're only seeing maybe 25, 30 new posts every day, because most people don't necessarily post every day. You might have your one or two or maybe five people out of 100 that post every day, because that is what they do in their business, or in their brand. But if you're only seeing 20, 25 posts of the people that you followed, you know, you're not going to just endlessly be scrolling. But it's not that way anymore. And for those of you who watch this that are active on social media, you know that. And because of that, there are a lot of people who are completely divesting from social media, period. I'm noticing people are even pretty much killing all of their social media except for one platform. So let's say if this is someone who has a podcast or a show, or they produce lifestyle content, they may only post on YouTube. Or some of your OG YouTubers, like some of my favorites, they don't even post on YouTube anymore. They only post on IG. And it seems like maybe every 6 months they'll come back and drop a video and say, I'm so sorry, I left my YouTube family. You guys, I'm back. And they'll be like, I'm going to be posting weekly from such and such. And then you don't see him again for 6 months, because it really is hard to keep up with all of the platforms, especially if you're someone who posts every day. So it really is becoming a thing where, yes, we want to make sure we use the free at first opportunity to use all of these platforms if we have businesses or ministries or community service based organizations, nonprofits. We want to be able to connect with as many people as possible, but it's becoming overwhelmingly true. I think more now, it's in front of our faces, and it's not just theory anymore, that it's really not just about the numbers. It's really about connecting with your particular audience. I don't remember the number of people that are on Instagram right now, but it is a lot of people. I want to say at least 1 billion people, they say, are on Instagram. I don't know. I don't remember if that was Instagram or TikTok, but I'm pretty sure TikTok is probably more than 1 billion. But anyway, of 1 billion people, and for those, especially people who are service providers. If you're a service provider, if you're a counselor, if you are a coach, if you create any type of educational content, there are way more people surfing online than any of us could serve by ourselves. There are way more people looking for inspiration, looking for instructions, directions, looking for resources. There are way more people than any of us could serve alone. So, although there's absolutely a place for connecting with those people who we can touch locally, or people who we can touch in our state by actually being places in person, or even traveling. But even those people, a lot of times, are connected to us most consistently through an online presence. And so it's becoming more obvious to me, and from what I have seen around online, it's becoming more obvious to a lot of us that it takes time. It takes a lot of time to actually produce good content for any kind of media platform. And because it takes a lot of time, it's going to be even more important that we spend that time well. And if unfollowing everyone on one platform, or just creating a whole new follow list on another platform, whatever is actually going to position you, or for me to position me to connect with my audience at this juncture, that's what I'm willing to do. Not because I'm not willing to do anything at all. That's something else that we'll talk about. But I'm definitely willing to like disconnect from anything that's going to be a distraction. I'm willing to disconnect from anything that, and mind you, distraction is something can be a distraction that's not necessarily bad. It's just not what you're focused on right now. And that's one thing that I noticed for me. Like I can kind of be a loyalty follower is what I can say. I'm very funny, I guess, about who I follow. But at the same time, there have been times where I've gone through like my entire follow list of people that I follow, and there are people who are doing great things that in real life I support hugely, but I don't follow their content because their content is not necessarily it's not going in the direction I guess that I'm trying to go. So I'm not necessarily inspired by it. And if anything, there are accounts that I have felt like I don't know. Sometimes the value system is a little bit off, and for me, because I'm a sensitive person anyway, like I just had to learn that you can love people for who they are and actually wish them well, and you don't have to see what they do every day because sometimes what they're doing is actually almost in opposite to what you're the direction that you're trying to go in. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be bad. And so that was kind of like step one for me. But now, like I'm noticing even during like election season, which is the next thing that we'll just flow into, um, I'm being very careful about what I consume, even though I'm consuming a lot less these days because I'm creating a lot more. Um, there's just certain accounts that is like if I follow you on YouTube already, and that's where the content of yours that I actually watch is, I don't necessarily have to follow you anymore on Instagram. Because here's what it is. I think this is a good way to explain it. It starts to feel like an echo chamber. This is me. Everyone is different with what they see online. But anytime I start to feel like I'm in an echo chamber, I start unfollowing. Especially if it's like especially if it's people who post a whole lot and I already follow them on YouTube and they post like 9 videos every day on YouTube and then they post like 5 videos every day or five, pieces of content every day on Instagram. Like, do I need to be following you on my personal account and my business account and on YouTube? Like, that works for me for some creators because I enjoy their content on all platforms. And I don't see their content every day on all platforms. But when it starts to feel like an echo chamber, those are the times when I'm just like, this is why I don't like social media. But at the same time, I'm out here posting. And once I'm really on point the way I need to be, my posts are going to be a lot more frequent. But I think, again, that's the thing that I don't really like about the algorithm because the way the algorithm thing is set up, because the more you watch a person's content, like it doesn't just naturally allow you to see their next video in a couple of days. Like I can like your video and tomorrow you the first thing in my timeline and it's like everything you posted for the last month is the first thing on my timeline. It's just a lot. And that's the thing about social media that I don't enjoy. I like that the algorithm pays attention and gives you more of what you like. But it's just overkill to me. That's a lot of times that's how I feel. And that's not the fault of the person, the creator. The not the creator God, but it's not the fault of the content creator. Um it's just how this thing works. And the more you post and the more interaction there is on your posts, the more the people who interact with your posts are going to see it. And so that's how this goes. And like for me, when I post, I want people to interact with my content, but them interacting with my content means they're going to see more of my content. And so Yeah, like I said, it just kind of becomes an echo chamber. And some people could say, like, oh, well, just don't watch it. Just scroll past it. But my thing is, if I'm going to scroll past somebody's content every time I see it, I just probably don't need to follow them. Because I don't follow a whole lot of people as it is. It's kind of taking up space. That's how I look at it. That's just me without me studying the way this works. But the more I begin to study the way this actually works, and not just kind of trying to figure out and listening to this IG content coach and that person who just showing you what worked for them, but who doesn't necessarily have the science. I don't think anybody has it 100% down, but there are some people who have it better than others. And I feel like in the past couple of months, I have come across people who understand this a little bit more, almost from a scientific side of it. And so that is why I strongly would consider unfollowing everyone. So I took that rabbit trail. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever, if you're a content creator and you have a purpose, I guess, besides just being inspired, because I think it's great if you're on social media to be inspired. Everybody doesn't have to create content. Like, Lord knows, we do not all have to be posting on social media. But if you are someone who does post for a reason, be it a ministry or a business, or a nonprofit business, have you ever considered unfollowing everyone? Have you ever read anything about how that could work? I'd love to hear in the comments how you do that. I think, and I'm one of those people who I can follow and mute. Like if it's someone that like I usually like their content, but then if it's just like what is going on with them, and I don't necessarily want to see it, I will mute it. So I still follow, but you're muted. But with that, just because of the whole algorithm thing, it still kind of feels like a waste of space almost on my timeline, even though I don't see it. It's weird. But anyhow, let me know in the comments if you've ever thought about unfollowing everyone. If you're a content creator that has a business, and if you haven't unfollowed everyone and you feel like you should, is it like a loyalty thing? Are you afraid that everyone who you unfollow will unfollow you? Do you care? That's what I wanted to get to before I move on. One of the things that I read about why sometimes when people start, like let's say you had a personal account for 10 years and you decide to start a business, why sometimes it is helpful when people like completely start over instead of trying to transpose the business that they have or the page that they have into a business page from a personal page. They say the reason why sometimes it's better when you completely start over is because having a lot of followers who do not engage with your content actually makes it harder for you to get on the radar of the algorithm of the people who actually would like your content and would engage with it, right? That was another thing. And so when I read that, that is one of the main things that made me think about like, oh, as much as I love everybody who I follow now and who follows me now, if I unfollowed everyone and the people who are only following me out of like a loyalty follow because they know me, if it's that, and then I unfollow them, then most likely, or maybe not, they may or they may not unfollow me. And if they unfollow me, even though I would have less followers, when I post something and I don't get as much engagement because there's only a certain amount of people following me, when I post something, at least the algorithm would read that and put my content on the radar of people who would interact with my content because they just like the content. They're not like new followers, people who will be following me simply because they like what they see, as opposed to having over 1,000 followers And most of them are people that you know that watch you but don't interact with you. So, it's kind of a give and take. It could be people you love. Y'all can have a great relationship. That's one of the things that I love too about the idea of unfollowing everyone, unless it is like very strategic follows because it's content that you want to see, is that your relationship with people in real life is not synonymous with how much you interact with their content and how much they interact with yours, right? And so if you unfollow everyone who is really not advantageous for you to follow based upon the algorithm, and then people who don't really care to see your content anyway or won't interact with your content because they don't necessarily, it's not their cup of tea, unfollow you because it was only a loyalty follow, the algorithm will actually release your content to more people who may not personally know you yet, but who will actually engage with your content. It's intriguing. It's an interesting thought. It's something that I have thought of doing simply because I'm learning more about how this works. And obviously, I want my content to get out there to people who will actually enjoy my content and engage with the content so that they will be able to be exposed to the things that I share and learn about my business and be potential clients. So that's why, truth be told, if it were not for now doing business and ministry type things, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't even have, I probably wouldn't even, well, no, I would post because I am a creative. And I'm literally, I don't have to sit down and say, what am I going to post today? If I posted and spent the time of the ideas that I have and the simple ways that I could create content every day, I wouldn't have any problems posting anything. But I think just me being how I am when it comes to social media, like I don't even know that I would be on it like that if I didn't have a business or if I didn't have ministry style things that I post. Um, yeah, I think I probably would just be on YouTube maybe. And I would probably just be on Instagram just to see creative type things. I wouldn't even watch it for like podcast clips or any of that. I don't know. Yeah, I think I would probably, but then at the same time, most of the creators that I follow on YouTube is because I saw them first on Instagram. And then I followed their YouTube, and that's where I really watch their content. But anyway, I will move on from that spill. But have you ever thought about unfollowing everyone if you are a content creator or someone with a business that uses social media? All right, that covered the psychology of creativity corner. I want to talk about sleep hygiene and how we use social media. Is it a distraction? And what ways can we use it well without it being a distraction? All right. I mentioned election season being one of the other encouragements right now to like, I'm just really in a place with election seasons where like I'm not going to completely disengage social media because of things that people are posting, but in times past, because I wasn't being serious in eliminating excuses about what I do, the work that I put in and what work I'm willing to put in for my business, in past times, I literally just get off. I would just get off of social media completely during election season, and then maybe a month, 2, 3 after an election, I would get back on. That is just how much I don't want to see a lot of what is posted about the election season. But at the same time, I see the value in it. I see the value in getting people to not bury their heads in the sand and be more socially conscious. But with that comes everyone's opinion and their preference. And oh my, especially in the world of church, in the world of Christians, in the world of those who call themselves believers, those who are followers of Christ, there are many voices, as Miss Sylvia would say. Miss Sylvia knows I don't even know if she would ever see my podcast, but She is a woman of God from my church in Atlanta, and that's what she calls a lot of the things that are out there. Oh, it's the voices. The voices. If the voices, the voices have a lot to say right now on social media about the election season, and I just almost kind of don't want to hear it at this point. Because that's just for me personally, because I believe I am aware of my social responsibility, in a way that is becoming of a woman of God, a believer in Christ, and yeah, so I see the value in people posting their words, and this is not to be. This means when I say words, y'all know what I mean. What thus saith the Lord, that the Lord has said to them about the election. Um, but I I like critical thinkers that are believers as well, and I'm very encouraged and inspired by people who they're not getting into the weeds with you about what this politician believes and what they say and this and that and the third. They have a particular stance that they believe is according to the word of God, and that's where they're going. They don't care what your politician says, right? I'm encouraged by both. I'm encouraged by both of those people. But I do realize that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for their favorite Christian voice to tell them what to do because of the times that we are living in. We don't have easy decisions ahead of us. And knowing that, and I failed to say this when I was speaking about social media as well. The algorithm can do what it wants to do, but at the end of the day, you know, God is in control of the algorithm. So you can do your part as best as possible, but God has a way of elevating the voices that He wants to be heard. But at the same time, um, the enemy also has a way of elevating the voices that he wants to be heard. And so, as uh, responsible Christians, we need to be sure that we are hearing the voice, the ultimate voice, the voice of God above everybody's voice. Even those who are saying, this is what the Lord told me, this is what you should do. We are not living in times where we can leave what we believe about anything in anybody else's hands. Yes, we can be advised, we can be instructed, we can be admonished with the word of God through his vessels that he chooses to use in this season, but we should never do anything, make any particular important decisions, and the only justification we have for those decisions is Pastor so and so said it, or Prophet so and so said thus and such. During this election season, watch your social media videos, listen to the podcast, do what you need to do. And for me, I like to listen to podcasts or watch podcasts. So I have listened to some things about politics and about the election season. But at the end of the day, here's what I'm going to do, and this is what I encourage you to do. We're going to deal with this in a holistic fashion. We're gonna first start with prayer. We're gonna all pray, and we're gonna ask God to lead us and guide us into all truth. Each of us, ask the Lord. Ask for yourself. If you are 18 and up, and you can vote in this country, Lord, lead me and guide me into all truth. You pray that prayer. You study the word. Stay in the word. You research the candidates who you could potentially vote for, and all of the policies and so forth and so on. You research, then you're going to pray again. So I got 4. We got you pray and ask the Lord to lead you and guide you into all truth. You study, you stay in the Word of God, so you stay familiar with the character of God and with the wisdom of God, and you keep your ears tuned to the voice of the Holy Spirit. Then you're going to research for yourself. Go to actual official websites. Even though at the end of the day, everything can be called propaganda. If you go to this news site or this news site, it's going to say this or it's going to say that. Research as much as you can, whatever documents. Also your it just slipped my mind just that fast. Your city's voter registration. It's a particular board. I know who the people are. I know that's for sure. Here I was just having a conversation with someone who is a part of our board here in the city that I live in. Actually go and ask those people questions or send them emails or go to information sessions that give information about how things are going to, how this law or that law is going to impact you and your family and your community. And don't just listen to what they said. Ask them to show you where, or pull things up online. Sit and read with someone about it. Ask questions. Get some help in understanding. So, and this is for all of us, because it comes up very quick, and sometimes there's a lot of things to research, and then you either end up being the person who is standing at your booth for an hour because you're Googling and stuff on your phone while you're trying to vote, because you're trying to be responsible without a lot of time. And I'm not even knocking that, because at least you did that and you didn't just go and punch these different things. Or sometimes people end up just punching for the party because they already know, like, I don't know these people, but in general, this is my party, so here, one punch, right? So do your research ahead of time. So even if you are going to do one punch, you can do it in good conscience that all of the people on that ballot are people that you will say, like, okay, yes, of the choices, this is the best choice that aligns with my belief system, as well as aligns with my values and what needs to happen in my community, right? Do your research. You're going to pray again, and then you're going to vote. So you're going to pray. You're going to study the word. You're going to pray again. I think I just added a prayer. You're going to research. You're going to pray one more time, and then you're going to go vote, right? I know what your pastor said. I know what the prophets had said. I know all of that. And I'm not saying any of them are wrong. It's some of them I might agree with. But I can honestly say, up until this point, there is no one person, there is no one human on this earth that I can say I have talked to yet on anything. Well, maybe not on anything, but on these politic things, there's not many people who I 100% agree with, like wholeheartedly, even though we might make a similar choice or the same choice, because for the most part, I in good conscience can say, yes, I agree with this, or yes, this is the best and the most ethical choice. This is the most responsible choice, right? So, but because of that, like, while I do believe God speaks to pastors and prophets and preachers and teachers and evangelists about political things, I do believe God can and does speak to people. For me, I don't believe I'm heavily impacted in a space like this in a today's world as much as maybe I was when I was 22, 23. I'm trying to remember. I've already told my age on this podcast, but for whatever reason this evening, let me not date myself. But I remember an election or two when I was in my early 20s that um, the way I voted was heavily influenced by the church that I was going to, and by that particular sect or that particular denominational association. The way I voted at that time period was very much impacted because I was learning new things about the Bible. And so my eyes were just becoming so open in different ways that it had not been before. That because of that, and because I was in that space, I was very highly impacted by what those preachers within that group were saying. And so if I had it to do again, I don't necessarily know that I would have voted the way I voted at that time for certain offices. And so knowing that and just knowing where I am today, like, you might as well just not say nothing to me. I mean, we can talk about it. I'm not going to be angry if you tell me your opinion about me voting, but like, what I'm trying to say is there may be people who want or need to hear a prophet or a preacher tell them who to vote for. There might be. There might be some people who need that, or they're not going to make a good decision. I don't even trust that decision making for me when it comes to voting. Like, I don't trust that. I don't trust that just because so and so said it, this is what I should do. Now, I might pray and study and pray and research and pray and still end up voting for what prophet so-and-so or pastor so-and-so or evangelist so-and-so said. So, whether that confirms or not that the person was correct, or no matter what the result is. But I cannot in good conscience make a decision based off of what they said only. What they said might be a confirmation, but for me, personally speaking, in this particular space in life, like, I don't I don't want the preacher to tell me who to vote for. Now, I want the preacher to remind me to make a good choice and to represent and honor God. But I don't necessarily want to hear the prophets and the evangelists telling me who the Lord had said to vote for. And y'all, some people might feel a way about that. But maybe that's because that's just not that is not what I feel like I need right through here. So although I strongly believe in the voice of the Lord and that he still speaks in today's day and time, that is not an effective strategy to influence me on how to vote. Now, there are some people who may need that influence to vote. I have no qualms with it, but I do feel like we should be very careful to direct people to the Lord. Always. Ourselves. Especially if we're going to base these decisions off of spiritual implications. If we're going to say that, the thus saith the Lord, let's make sure we are pointing people to the Lord and not trying to be too overtly influential over the decisions that they make. And so that's that on that. I'm going to move on from there. But I wanted to say that to y'all about election season. That is literally what I have in my notes. Pray, study, research, pray again, and then vote. And then after you vote, let me say that before I move on. Pray some more. After you vote, keep praying. Keep praying for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Pray for discipline. Pray for stewardship, because in the past 20 some odd years or so that I have been eligible to vote, the things that have made the biggest impact on my personal, now notice I'm not saying the whole wide world, because everybody's in different situations and have had different experiences. Ultimately, my personal physical, financial, social, and familial well-being has been more influenced by my choices, ultimately, I'll say it like that. Now, there have been some tax laws and different things like that that have impacted me over time in different ways. Um, and even though it's not necessarily me, it is me in the way of empathy and in the way of being a fellow human being and a fellow black woman. There are many laws that have personally affected me because they have affected my brothers and sisters adversely. So it is important that we do our part, but I do believe that ultimately um, God has the final say, and since He has the final say, those of us who believe can depend on Him to give us the diligence and the knowledge and the wisdom to make good choices in who we vote for, but also in how to live our day-to-day lives despite of who ends up in office based upon the collective vote of the other people in our community. All right, I believe I'm ready to move on now. So, last two things, and these will be quick. So, one more thing I wanted to address. Well, two more things I wanted to address. So, I want to call this little piece right here, there you go, trying to be regular. There you go, trying to be regular. Now, when I say regular, I don't mean regular in the sense that, like, you know, you breathe oxygen and you are human just like the next person. Um, God created all of us in His image. And since He didn't want us to all be exactly alike, He made us uniquely. And sometimes one of the things that is a mindset or a way of being for creatives, especially if you are a creative who is on the rise or you are really flowing and doing things in your lane, as you go through that transition, sometimes from being someone who just kind of did things leisurely to being someone who is about that, of being someone who really does a thing, there is a temptation to diminish yourself. I've mentioned on the podcast before situations where I didn't necessarily realize it until, like, in retrospect, that I subconsciously almost, and then of course it became a conscious thing, diminished myself to make people comfortable. And I believe a part of the reason why is because there are times where maybe seeds that encourage false humility were planted. And I do feel like, especially, I feel like it can impact anyone, but I feel like especially for an empathetic type, a type with higher empathy, a type, a counseling or coaching type, a teacher type, which a lot of creative people are. It is what helps us to be that creative. We feel very deeply, even if it is. There are some people who feel very deeply, but you might not ever know, or you might not necessarily assume that because they do not present as emotional. They do not present as someone who feels deeply. But most creative people, or most, not just even creative people, but most leaders, especially if they are leaders after the heart of God, feel very deeply. We may struggle with the expression of it in different ways, but sometimes the depth of our feelings comes out or is given an outlet through the way we create. You know, whether you're someone who plays piano or you're someone who sings, you paint, you write poems, whatever you do, most creative people feel very deeply. And because we feel very deeply, oftentimes our empathy level is a lot higher and we think about how other people feel, right? And so we have to learn to manage that, because thinking about how other people feel can be an asset, especially if you are a person who works in a care profession or you do something that you want people to be able to feel. We need to care about how people feel. But when it becomes a space of diminishing oneself is when it becomes unhealthy. And I thought about that earlier this week. And I think maybe in more recent weeks, I've heard, multiple different people mention that about they may not have called it diminishing yourself, but basically almost being a wallflower or hiding, not because you don't have something to give or not because you don't even have confidence. Sometimes it very much is based on your environment. Sometimes you can be in an environment that you feel like the best thing for you to do is dumb down. But what I want to remind you of today is that diminishing yourself, dumbing down, is actually not humble. Like sometimes we do it because we think it's being humble, and it's not. It's actually false humility. Diminishing yourself for the comfort of an environment that actually might not necessarily be conducive to your growth is actually false humility. So that's one thing. That is one thought to hold on to. Um, for some reason, we've had it mistaken, and a lot of us have felt like diminishing ourselves is being humble. But it's actually not, because true humility is honest. True humility means knowing when to speak and when to be quiet. That's not the same as diminishing yourself or hiding or almost being afraid to shine because of the environment that you're in. How sometimes in an attempt to be humble, in an attempt to not be a show off, or in an attempt to I guess not stand out too much, because oftentimes with those who feel deeply, you can sense jealousy. You can sense disdain. You can sense a lack of approval. And a person never has to utter a word, but oftentimes the very sensitive type, again, is a very creative type, or a very a type that is able to draw people in, but also draw them together because of the fact that you feel so deeply. Oftentimes, because of that, and because people don't always know your struggles, because you may not, like I said, a lot of times very sensitive people don't even present like they feel deeply, because people don't see them as very emotional. Um, because of that, and because you do feel so deeply, you can tell sometimes, you can feel sometimes when you're in an environment where you're being looked at sideways, or you're in an environment where you know that it's almost like you better not dare to think you don't come around here thinking you finna shine, because that, no, you not. Nobody ever has to say anything to you sometimes, and you can feel that in a particular environment, so you might dumb down a little bit. And by dumb down, that's, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I mean it in a way of you you just don't allow yourself to be. And I know it can be a really thin line, because sometimes The best thing to do in certain situations is to be quiet and observe. The best thing to do in certain situations is to stand back and allow the appropriate person or the appropriate entity to handle a thing until you're invited into a space. So I'm not saying at all to go around trying to, assert yourself in every situation. But I do mean being discerning and also recognizing when you're doing things that are to diminish yourself. And here are some really subtle ways that sometimes we, and I say we because it's definitely something that I have been shown more in recent years. There's been more attention called to it, to myself as I'm doing my own inner work. Even working with my own counselor, we've talked about situations. Here's an example. I was at do I want to give this? I'm going to be very general because usually that works with these. I remember being in a particular place. I went somewhere just to handle some everyday business, and someone was calling my name, and I didn't hear them at first. But where I was, the person who was serving at the particular place where I was, heard the person before I did, and they were looking, and then they were like, kind of like looking at me, and then the person got closer, and I could hear them calling my name. And when I turned around, I recognized the face of the person, but I didn't remember their name. And I greeted them with a smile and a hello and all of that. But the person, I could tell they were like very offended because I did not remember their name. And one thing about me is I remember a face before a name any day. I'm not really sure why that is or what that is. But once I've actually had a conversation with you, I'm gonna remember your name. And I'm very funny about names. I feel like names are important. I don't like to misspell people's names. Not saying that I haven't before, but I hate misspelling names. Um, and I might be sensitive to that because I have a name that people misspell all the time. So, I don't like to misspell people. So it's like, because the lady, I just gave it away that it was a lady. Because the lady was offended, I could tell she was offended that I didn't remember her name. Because of that, the next 30 minutes, I believe, is something that I allowed because I was trying to prove to this lady that, like, I'm not stuck up. Like, I don't think I'm all of that, and I don't think you're beneath me or anything because I didn't remember your name. Now, I don't think like that. I know that names are important. And I could tell the lady was offended that I didn't remember her name. And so to almost pay her back, almost for not knowing her name, and I knew that she was offended, I endured like a 35, almost 40-minute conversation that I did not necessarily want to participate in. In fact, I was a bit in a hurry to get to my next spot of what I needed to do. But because I didn't want the lady to be offended, especially I didn't remember your name, and then I'm getting ready to rush off, and you want to have a 35, 40-minute conversation with me? Oh no, may it never be. But I didn't realize I was doing it until after. And this is me talking through this with my counselor. And it was just an example of how, like, sometimes in order to prove to people that we don't think we're this or that or the third, we may, I guess, participate almost in people pleasing is a good way to describe it. Now, I feel like in the past maybe 3 to 5 years, I have grown by leaps and bounds when it comes to that. Like, I'm not too much just doing something because I don't want somebody to think or feel whatever, because of my boundaries, because I know what it does to me when I do that. And so that was a new scenario for me. That was a new situation for me, being in a space where, like, more people in my local area may know my name or know who I am when maybe I have met them in a large crowd of people and I don't remember their name, and I can feel that they're offended, so I feel bad, and then I try to pay them back by diminishing myself. Like, that is just an example of a subtle way. Now, that was maybe a year or so ago, but I remember that being a thing, that a situation that reminded me to continue to work on the propensity to need to, like, kind of like, let me act like whatever because I don't want people to think, kind of thing. So that's my encouragement for creatives when it comes to, or not just creative, just people in general, people who are growing in a particular area. Maybe you are growing in your walk with God. Maybe you are growing in your competence in a particular subject matter. It's okay to be humble and to to prefer. We should prefer others over ourselves. We should be quick to listen and slow to speak. That's something we can work on. But that doesn't mean that in a space where you do have a level of knowledge and you're asked a question, that you should pretend like you don't, because there are people around that you don't want to offend. And so that's why I call this segment, there you go, trying to be regular. Like, there's a reason why people sometimes go to these great extremes and great lengths to be seen as different or to be noticed. And ultimately, the root of it is because God did make each person one of one. And when we are not in a space where we are able to exist authentically in who God made us to be, that urge will be there. And it will play itself out in one way or another. Um, and sometimes the way it plays itself out is more or less hurtful to you or other people. But when we rest authentically in who God created us to be, um, by knowing Him more and getting His perspective on what is actually important from day to day, when we are consistently doing that, we can see ourselves rightly. We cannot think of ourselves more highly than we ought to. But at the same time, we're not on the other extreme end of that either. We're not seeing ourselves like we are not allowed to exist in what God is doing and what God is growing in us. So that's my encouragement for creatives. There you go, trying to be regular instead of standing out. And my admonishment for that this week is to stop. Stop that. Notice within yourself when you are doing that and stop it. Even if it is as simple as it, you can try and notice certain things and make those corrections with simple things. It could be that on your lunch break, if you know you have plans on your lunch break to sit outside and do whatever, and every day, like clockwork, when you get ready to go have your quiet time during your lunch break, someone makes a request of you and you end up standing up eating your lunch because you can't tell people no. That is a subtle way of diminishing yourself, because you know that you have a need. You had a plan to meet that need of having some solitude or having some time with God, but you diminish your own needs every day consistently, like without fail, because you don't want someone to think, oh, I don't want to offend them, or oh, I don't want to disappoint them. They always ask me, but in not disappointing them, you always disappoint yourself. And it's not always necessary for you to put your plans down and not keep your commitments to yourself in order to accommodate other people. So just pay attention to that. What are some ways that you diminish yourself? It doesn't mean that you can never put your plans aside and help somebody else. I'm not being like extreme and ridiculous about it, but I'm saying be honest with yourself and notice, like, when are you people pleasing? When are you cowering? When are you responding in a way that you feel will shield you from some of the hate or shield you from some of the rejection that you might feel when you are around people who do not want you to just authentically be yourself for whatever reason. And then, some people might say, people don't be thinking about you, it's all in your head. Hey, either way, whether it's really that people feel a particular way and you can tell, or whether it is that it's just all in your imagination, either way, the way you're thinking about yourself in comparison to other people or in comparison to whatever causes you to make choices that are going to display a diminishing or a dumbing down of yourself. Just be mindful of it. Give yourself a reminder. Stop doing that. Work through it. Talk with a coach, a counselor, journal, pray, pay attention. But stop doing that. We're going to stop doing that in 2024 and beyond. All right. All right. Now, last but not least tonight, I just want to give some encouragement from the Word of God. And we're going to go to Psalm 61, verse 1 and 2. And we're going to close with that. All right, Psalm 61, it says, "Hear my cry, O God, listen to my prayer." Later. I'm sorry, hold on a second. What? Okay, hold on, you guys. I'm so sorry. For whatever reason. Well, let me just use the paper Bible. See, that's why I use the paper Bible. My Bible app decides that I have to update right now in the middle of me reading the verse. So, we're going to go to the good old paper Bible. Give me a minute to turn to Psalm 61. I'm like, and it won't let me click later, so I guess I've clicked later too many times. All right, Psalm 61. Verse 1 says, again, all right, verse 1 says, "God, hear my cry, pay attention to my prayer. I call to you from the ends of the earth when my heart is without strength. Lead me to a rock that is above me. Lead me to a rock that is high above me." And if my Bible app was working, I was going to read it to you from the King James, because that's the version that I have, that I love. And if I'm going to try to say it from memory, I believe it says, "Hear my cry, O Lord, attend unto my prayer. From the ends of the earth do I call out to thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to a rock that is higher than I." That's what it sounds like in the King James Version. Even though the one that I read just now is, I believe this is one of the ESVs. No, this is the CSB. That was the CSB that I just read. But I wanted to encourage you tonight, my creatives and my scholars, whether you are a Bible scholar, whether you are a scholar of counseling, or whatever it is that you are well read and well studied in. Let us all be Bereans, people who study the Word of God. Let us all be students of the Word of God. But I wanted to read Psalm 61, 1 and 2 to encourage those of you who have been in despair, or those of you who have experienced times of despair recently. And despair, basically, if you look it up in the dictionary, it basically means without hope. Another way to think about despair is a cause or a reason of hopelessness, or for hopelessness. That is a description of the mindset or the mind frame of a person who is in despair. And one of the reasons why Psalm 61 sticks out to me is because, one, Psalms are always very encouraging when feeling different emotions or crying out to God about different things that maybe we have felt a lack of hope, like we have no hope. But one of the things that I was reminded of was the fact that the writer of the psalm, the one that we read tonight, was David. And we know David to be a creative. Not only a musician was David, but David also obviously was a writer of poems, a writer of both poetry and prose. David was a writer of those. And we can tell by reading the Psalms that the ones that David wrote, that he was someone who felt things very deeply. And he was able, through his writing, to express himself in an emotional way through the things that he wrote. We're able to actually know some of the emotions that David felt in some of the most trying times of his life. One of the things that we see in Psalms, we see the lament. We see the question that David had to God. We can hear the anguish. We can hear the frustration. We can hear the confusion. We can hear even when he's just like, God, why aren't you doing anything about this? And so, as we read through the Psalms, we can continue on even in that same Psalm and be reminded of how no matter what David went through, he was always able to find his hope in God. He was always able to encourage his own soul. He was able to move from questioning God to talking to his own soul, questioning himself, and asking his soul, like, why are you disheartened within me? Why are you in despair? Why are you without hope? Remember, we can hope in God, the God of our salvation, who has never left or forsaken, who has brought us through many things. Remember the God of your salvation. And so I want to encourage all of you. You are the creative scholars that are a part of this community tonight, to remember in times of despair that you can be honest with God, that God is not threatened by any question you have. There's no question you have for God about your life and your experience that God is intimidated by. Like, sometimes we want to ask people questions, but we already know, like, either we can be intimidated by the person, or we already know that person may be intimidated by us asking that question, or we know that, oh, this could be an intimidating situation here. This might not go well if I ask so and so thus and such, right? And sometimes we do step out and we ask people things that they're not ready to answer, and sometimes the response isn't very good. Sometimes we don't get to ask those people any more questions. You ask somebody the wrong question, depending on the situation, you might not see them anymore. But we don't have to worry about that with God. God is not intimidated by any of the questions that we have. He is in no way going to leave us or forsake us because we cry out to him and because we ask him questions. So I want to encourage all of you tonight, especially those of you who are in despair, those of you who are feeling like you're without hope. My prayer for you tonight is that you will cry out to God no matter where you are and no matter what situation you are in. My prayer for you tonight is that you will find hope in the Word of God. If you're someone who has not accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, that you will come to him. The Bible says very clearly, come to me, all of you that are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And it goes on to say that my yoke is easy and my burden is light. If you are carrying a heavy burden, just the burdens of life, just living in the times we are living in, there are so many weights that we contend with every day. I encourage you today, if you have not accepted Christ if you have not found that hope, if you have not been able to find that rock or that sturdy thing that is higher than you to lean on, my encouragement tonight is that you will give your life to God, that you will say, um, you will be able to recognize where you are and what you need and who you need. And one of the ways that I really encourage, especially those of you or those of us who are already believers, I'll end tonight with one of my favorite recommendations, and it is this right here. This is the Bible in 1 year, or the 1 year Bible. The first time I tried out a 1 year Bible was probably 2014-15 when I was at Columbia International University. One of my classes required us to read each day of the Bible in 1 year. It was probably one of the I'm trying to remember. It was one of the Bible classes. It wasn't. I remember. Anyway, it was one of the classes that was about the Bible, and one of the challenges for us was to read every day for the time that we were in that class, the Bible in 1 year. And since those many years ago, in the last 2 years, I have pulled out the Bible in 1 year again, and it has been such a blessing to me. For those of us who do deal with those different challenges with focus and just making time to do all of the things, I know right now for me in the season that I'm in, where technically I have two jobs. I have a full-time job, and then I have my business, and then I have other things that God is opening doors and giving me guidance and resources and abilities in ministry. So I do a lot on a day-to-day basis, pretty much every day of the week, including my weekends. So finding time to just make sure that I soak in God's word, where I'm not necessarily going to the Bible with my own agenda, which I should. I can. I absolutely go to the Bible with my own agenda when I'm trying to find answers and comfort in different things. But just falling in love with the Word of God and really growing in love with God. The Bible in 1 year has been one of my favorite tools to do that. I filmed a video, but I didn't even put it out over the weekend. And the thought that I shared, that I will close with for real this time, third closing, that I will close with is that God is looking for a church that actually loves Him. God wants His people to actually love Him. And, we know that the Word tells us that He's coming for a glorious church without spot or wrinkle, washed in the blood of the Lamb. And we sometimes forget that the ability, the potential to be without spot or wrinkle is not something that we can work our way into. That is something that we were given through Christ. We were given through the blood of the Lamb the ability to appear spotless before the throne of grace, to be without spot and without wrinkle. That doesn't come from our works. Now, actually presenting ourselves in this world where people can see that we are His church by the way we live every day, the sanctification of that, the willing to submit to God, the willing to humble ourselves. That is how we actually show up in this life as without spot or wrinkle. But sometimes we neglect to promote actually knowing God, because we know God by His Spirit and through His Word. And the more we actually love God, as the Bible says, if we love Him, we will keep His commandments. Sometimes when we hear that, I think we only think like God is saying, like, oh, if you really loved me, you would keep my commandments. And it is that, but my challenge this evening is for us to know that it's actually like that's the key. We're being given the key. We're not just being told like if we love God, we would keep his commandments. It's really helping us to know that no, like if you love me or when you love me, you're gonna grow. Like you're gonna keep my commandments. So the more we actually grow in love with God, the more we will see ourselves living the way he's desiring for us to live. The more we are going to be motivated to do the right thing, the more we're going to be motivated to make good choices, the more we're going to be disciplined, the more we're going to surrender ourselves to the chastening and the discipline so that we can grow up some. The more we love God, the more we're going to actually do that. So I encourage us all, yes, we need to obey God and we need to live our lives in true holiness. But the best way for us to do that is to actually know who we're serving. Not just his rules, not just his laws, but we will love his law if we meditate on it day and night. All right, so that's my encouragement for today. Find hope in God and know that you don't have to, despair doesn't have to take you out. That despair can lead you to a rock that is higher than yourself, where you will find the grace in the time that you need it, and that you will find the help and the hope that will sustain you from now until the end of time. All right, thank you so much for watching tonight. If you have not yet, make sure you subscribe so that you'll catch the podcast every week. Give this video a thumbs up because when you do, it does put it on the algorithm so that more people can see it. And I look forward to seeing you next week right here on Tuesday for the Creative Scholar podcast. I do want to let you guys know that this is season 1. Season 2 is already in the making. It's already being formulated and scheduled. And so at some point we may experience a schedule shift. Tuesday has been experimental. Basically more for my schedule than anything. But as we prepare to go into season 2 after the next couple of episodes, we may have a scheduling shift. We may or may not, but I'll make sure you all know. But for now, we're going to continue on Tuesdays at around 9 p.m. And we're going to keep going from there. We're just going up. So I'd love for you to share the podcast with a friend or share it on your YouTube timeline or on any other social media platform. I'd love for you to subscribe and join the Creative Scholar podcast fam. And I hope you've enjoyed and been encouraged by this video. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And I just want you to remember that doing your inner work is not just a good idea. It's the right thing to do. Have a good night.